So when my sister was about 3 years old, she woke up in the morning and was cross-eyed, just out of the blue. And they had to go and visit the doctor and find out what was going on. And from that day onward, she had these really, really thick bottle cap glasses, like the thick ones that were, especially back then, we're talking about in the 70s, they were pretty noticeable. And when she was about 14 years old, she ended up going to this like youth conference with a bunch of youth kids from her church. And while she was there, she ended up breaking her glasses. And I guess they were still wearable, but they looked really bad. And I guess they were really uncomfortable on her face. And it was a little embarrassing. A 14-year-old, you know, it's kind of that impressionable age where you're really trying to do everything you can to not be noticed for reasons like that, right? Anyways, she ends up going to listen to this preacher. And at the end of his preaching, they asked if anybody needed healing. And she had never been exposed to anything like this, but she was just like, you know, God, she's just saying in her heart, right? She's thinking to herself, you know, God, if you could do something for me, could you maybe heal my eyes? And I guess the preacher prayed. It was just a general prayer. She didn't like go up to, you know, or like no one came up to her or anything. It was just a general prayer over just a whole gathering. And she said that she felt this warmth go from her head to her toes and then back up. And she was immediately healed. And to this day, she hasn't needed glasses for that reason. And it was pretty remarkable. And today, as we study another chapter in the Bible, we're going to be talking about a man that was born blind that came across Jesus' path. So welcome to Who in the World is Jesus, episode number 4, where we're going to talk about the man that was born blind. And as we talk about this story, I want you to think about just how fortunate we are to live in the society that we do with the advancements of technology and, you know, LASIK eye surgery and glasses and contacts and all these things. We're like really, really fortunate. I think that my wife, I hope she isn't I hope this is okay to say, but I think that she said that she would officially be, I guess they would say that she would be legally blind without her glasses. And I'm sure that there's people that are going to be listening right now that there's things that maybe happen to you that without the help of, you know, doctors and whatever else, we'd be in deep trouble. So we're going to pick up the story in John chapter 9 about the man that's born blind and see what happened to him. So here we go. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or sins from his parents? So I guess back then there was this suspicion that if you were born blind, then it must have been something that happened to you. You know, it must have been because of something that someone did and you were almost cursed. Okay, but Jesus says it was not because of his sins or his parents' sins. Jesus answered, this happened so that the power of God could be seen in him. We must carry out the task assigned to us by the one who sent us. So he approaches the man. And he does things a little, I don't even know the way the reason why Jesus does some of the things that he does, but this is going to be interesting because he spits in the mud to make a paste and puts it on the blind man's eyes. And Jesus does a few different things like this in some of his miracles, and I almost feel like it's almost like a test. Like, are you going to accept my gift because of healing because you trust me? Or he almost makes it difficult to receive the healing. So imagine this. Here we go. Then he spits on the ground, made mud with his saliva, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. And he told him, "Go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam." So the man went and washed and came back seeing. I guess this pool wasn't too far from where the guy was sitting begging. Okay, so he was a beggar sitting down, kind of, hoping to collect some money because, honestly, he needed it. He was blind. He needed help. I'm sure there was many people back then that were, I think, beggars that were really in need were a commonplace thing to be seen in Jesus' time. All right. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. His neighbors and others who knew him as a blind beggar asked each other, "Isn't this the man who used to sit and beg?" And some said he was, and others said, "No, he just looks like him." But the beggar kept saying, "Yes, I am the same one." Interesting, because when my sister came back from her trip with the youth group and came back seeing without glasses, we were all kind of stunned. So much so that we were asking her to read and look at all these things at the house just to kind of prove it, because everybody was kind of doubtful. We had never seen anything like this in my family. This was pretty significant. And I'm sure back then, it was the same thing. No one had ever seen someone opening the eyes of the blind. The guy that was sitting blind, everybody knew him. It wasn't like some act. They're all wondering. Even for my parents, they brought my sister to the doctor, and sure enough, she had 20/20 vision, and the doctor was like, "You know what? I can't, encourage my patients to go do whatever your daughter did, but I can't deny that she's healed." So it was a real miracle, but there was still some doubt, from our own family, even so, that we wanted to prove. We want proof. We still want proof. If that happened today, I don't know. I'd be checking out the history on that person, right? Okay, so they asked, "Who healed you? And what happened?" And he told them, "The man they called Jesus made mud, spread it over my eyes, and told me, 'Go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself.' So I went and washed, and now I can see." "Where is he now?" they asked. "I don't know," he replied. Then they took the man who had been blind to the Pharisees, because it was on the Sabbath that Jesus had made the mud and healed him. Okay, so now it's going to get a little hairy, because they're bringing Jesus to the religious leaders. And as you know from the last story, with the lady who was caught in adultery, the religious leaders are they're not happy with Jesus at all at this point. And Jesus goes ahead and heals on the Sabbath. So the Sabbath was the day of rest. Sabbath was I'm not sure if you guys remember back in the day, like when I was a kid, Sundays were actually a day where all the stores were closed and you couldn't do anything. It was almost, it was weird. It was a weird time. Now all the stores are open every day. You can go shopping on Christmas Day. There's no day of rest. But for the religious leaders back then, Sabbath was a critical day of rest that needed to be followed, and you couldn't do any work. And I guess making mud, spitting, and healing this man was work on the Sabbath. And they bring the blind man to the religious leaders. And this is what happens. The Pharisees asked the man all about it. So he told them, "He put them out on over my eyes, and when I washed, I could see." Some of the Pharisees says, "This man Jesus is not from God, for he is working on the Sabbath." Others said, "But how could an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs?" So there was a deep division among the people. Then the Pharisees again questioned the man who had been blind and demanded, "What's your opinion about this man who healed you?" Once again, Jesus is making a division. Oh my goodness. He is the champion of making divisions and really kind of cutting to the heart of people. And here we go. We got one side of even though the Pharisees, some of them are upset and say a man that was a religious man that was really from God, he wouldn't do this on the Sabbath. And the other people are saying, yeah, but you know what? If he wasn't from God, how could he be healing the blind? So there's this division. And then just like how they demanded Jesus to answer when Jesus said on that last story with the lady that they wanted to stone to death for committing adultery, how they said, "I demand, that you answer." And then Jesus said, "Well, he who, is without sin, throw the first stone." They're demanding this guy an answer as well. So these guys, at this point, there was some divisions going on, and it was getting heated to be hanging out around Jesus. I mean, ultimately he dies, right? And there's reasons, and this is the buildup to the death. Okay, so we're going to see more and more division and more controversy as these stories and this series progresses. Okay. So then the Pharisees again questioned the man who had been blind and demanded, "What's your opinion about this man who healed you?" The man replied, "I think he must be a prophet." The Jewish leaders still refused to believe the man had been blind and could now see. So they called in his parents. They asked them, "Is this your son? Was he born blind? If so, how can he now see?" So they get the parents involved. There's this doubt that's happening. People aren't sure, I understand that. His parents replied, "We know this is our son and that he was born blind, but we don't know how he can see or who healed him. Ask him. He's old enough to speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who had announced that anyone saying Jesus was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. And that's why they said, "He is old enough, ask him." So even at this point, there is so much controversy going on that his parents are even afraid to speak up for their son. They knew that anybody that admitted Jesus to be the Messiah was going to be expelled from the synagogue. And the synagogue was a popular place. It was a place that, back then you had a lot of friends. Those were your connections. Those were your relationships. That was your community. And the synagogue would be challenging to be literally excommunicated. So for the second time, they called in the man who has been blind and told him, "God should get the glory for this, because we know this man Jesus is a sinner." So they're trying to get him to say, give God the glory and not give Jesus the glory. Even though maybe giving Jesus glory was giving God the glory. That's yet to be seen. So the man born blind says, "I don't know whether he is a sinner, But I know this, I was blind and now I see. But what did he do? They asked. How did he heal you? So, this is good. The guy's going to get a little snarky with the Pharisees. Because he's getting sick of the questions, you know? I'm blind. I was blind and now I can see. Is that not enough? Everybody knows who I am. You know? Look, the man explained. I told you once. Didn't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Yeah, now we're talking. He's sticking it to the man. I mean, the leaders of the Pharisees, I mean, for him to be standing up like this was significant. You don't just start talking back to the Pharisees and just think that all is going to go well, and all doesn't go well. Then they cursed him. They cursed the man born blind and said, you are his disciple, but we are the disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from. Here goes the man born blind again, sticking it to the man. Ready? Watch this. Why, that's very strange, the man replied. He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from? We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. If this man were not from God, he could not have done this. So now they're ticked. You were born a total sinner, they explained, and you are trying to teach us? And they threw him out of the synagogue. Dang. That man had some guts. Which he should. I mean, we're talking about a man born blind. I don't know what they don't never say what his age was. But man, if you were even as old as my sister, and at 14 went from being blind to seeing, I think that you would have some courage. And this healing obviously brought some courage to this man. And he stuck it to him. He stuck it to him good. Give the man some props. We like you. We like you, man born blind. All right, so Jesus is kind of out of the picture at this point. Jesus did his healing, left, and then all this stuff ensues. Okay? So when Jesus heard what had happened, he found the man and asked, do you believe in the Son of Man? The man answered, who is he, sir? I want to believe in him. You have seen him, Jesus said, and he is speaking to you. Yes, Lord, I believe, the man said, and he worshiped Jesus. Then Jesus told him, I entered this world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and to show those who think they see that they are blind. Some Pharisees who were standing nearby heard him and asked, are you saying that we are blind? If you were blind, you would be guilty, Jesus replied. But you remain guilty because you claim to see. Oh, goodness. So, this is a story of the man that was born blind, okay? If we were born in this day and age, what would we have done? It wasn't easy to say yes to Jesus in those days. Like I said, at this point in history of Jesus' life and like the ministry and the things that were going on. So Jesus pretty much started his ministry at like age 30. And it was only 3 short years before he was crucified. It didn't take long for him to really take people off. Now this man is taking people off as well. So it's this point we're given excommunication happening. Early in Jesus' ministry, Jesus was healing lots of people, but the risk wasn't there. The risk of excommunication, the risk of you becoming this person that is in the middle of the controversy, that wasn't there then. But from this point on, if you were with Jesus or were part of what was going on with him, you were part of the controversy, and it took some guts to side with Jesus. Props to this guy for doing it. What would you do if this were you? I think that even at this point in history, me being someone who believes in Jesus, it's not easy even now to say that you want to be a Jesus follower. There's parts of the world where people are actually dying for their faith even now. It's hard to believe. We're really fortunate in America. But there is a cost that comes with following Jesus. There's a price to be paid then. There's a price to be paid now. But that's okay. The reward is so much greater. So I called my sister actually yesterday because I wanted to get this story fresh in my mind about what she said. And this is going to be our big takeaway for this story. She said that, Steve, she said, I was healed back then, but that really wasn't the biggest thing that happened in my life. She said, that healing let me know that I was seen, known, and loved by God. She says that is the crux of my story. She said that ever since then, her faith has been brought back to the fact that she knows that she is seen, known, and loved by God. And I'm sure that this gentleman felt the same way, that he, after all those times of people passing him by, sitting and begging, some people giving, some people not, he was seen. And to be honest, that's where we all need to know that we are seen by God. I know circumstances might not always prove that. This gentleman's circumstances didn't prove that. But there's a plan. And sometimes God has a bigger plan than we understand. I know countless of people with tragic stories who have found their identity in being seen, known, and loved, and their past has been healed. So, I appreciate you guys joining me today for the story. Next week, we're going to talk about Jesus actually blatantly claiming that he's the Messiah. And this is a pivotal point in our story, because now, not only are, up until this point, the people are speculating that he is the Messiah, but he hasn't been telling anybody that he's the Messiah. But next week, he's going to be breaking that ice, and with that, there's going to be some repercussions that happen in future stories. So appreciate you guys joining me. We'll see you on the next one.